What is going on, everybody? My name is Cody S. Welcome to the channel. Today, as you can tell by the title of this video, we are going to be talking about some copper line setups. I've been getting a ton of questions on this topic, and I thought, you know what, I'm going to take some time to show you guys how I set up a copper rod. The reel, the line, the components, the backing, just everything about the copper setup. Show you guys what I'm doing. We're gonna be setting up a 225-foot copper setup today. I do have a 300 copper and a 150 copper that I've been using in my last couple of videos, and those are the things that you guys really had some questions on. And one of the biggest questions that I get is how to terminate the copper to the braid or copper to the mono. And then another question that I've been getting asked a lot too is about the Silas X reels from Piscifun. So before we get into talking about any of that, be sure to go down and hit that subscribe button down below. We do all sorts of awesome fishing content on this channel, from walleye fishing to salmon fishing and even some ice fishing here too throughout those winter months. But I do apologize for the little lack of videos that I've been posting the last couple of weeks here. I've been super busy. I'm trying to get through some of these guide trips. We're actually fishing some head-to-head events too as well. And unfortunately, I did have a little mishap in the boat. I broke my right hand. You know, it's not a very big fracture. It's actually a pretty small fracture, which is making things a little bit more difficult for me on a filming side of things, and just being able to do all of this self-filming that I do in the boat for you guys. So we're taking some time to heal up. I'm still running guided trips. I'm just doing a lot with my left hand, which has been a little difficult for me, but we're pushing through it. And I'm hopefully gonna be getting some more fishing content coming your way shortly as my hand continues to heal. So that's not gonna stop me from showing you guys how we are rigging up some copper setups today. So let's go ahead and get right into it. Just for the ease of time, I do have a Silas X reel already spooled up with some monofilament. I use that monofilament as a backer to the braid that I'm actually gonna be putting on this reel. Now I do have this reel attached to an Akuma Classic Pro GLT copper lead core rod. This is one of my favorite rods to use in the boat for lead core and copper setups. Not only is it inexpensive, but it does have all the features that you need, including these stainless steel guides to keep your wire and keep your lead core in excellent shape when you are out there fishing. If you are going to be using ceramic guides, there's a good chance that that copper or that lead core could cut through that ceramic and eventually ruin your lead core or your copper, or eventually ruin the rod too as well. So it is very important that you try to find a rod with some stainless steel guides. And again, with this rod coming in at $50, it just makes it a perfect option for some Great Lakes salmon. So let's get this thing spooled up. The copper that we're gonna be using today is actually a 45-pound test copper from Morgan's Tackle. They have a lot of awesome options from copper to wire line for your dipsy divers, and then also cable for your downriggers. So if you're looking for some great wire, check out Morgan's Tackle Company. I'll leave that link below. But we have 225 feet of copper spooled up here. First thing that you're gonna wanna do is take your braid. I have a 50-pound braid here. I recommend anywhere from 30 to 50 pound for this. I just like using 50 pound. It's a little bit possibly overkill, but it fits well on the rod, and it's gonna hold up to some of those bigger salmon that we're catching too as well. As far as color goes, it doesn't really matter. The color is not gonna be seen by the fish simply because this is gonna be behind that 225 feet of copper that we are adding to the reel. What I like to do to make this a little easier is actually just take off the end of the rod. That way I can spool this up pretty much right here. It'll run through that guide, and then I like to wear a glove to spool that braid or that wire on. So we'll go ahead and pull our mono through that guide, and then we will grab our braid. Now this is just a simple braid to mono knot. You can use whatever knot you feel most comfortable with. Hopefully you're not getting down to this knot that you're about to terminate. You should be adding enough braid to this reel that you should never reach this termination. But if you do, you want to have a good solid knot. I always like to use the Albright knot. Now I've seen this done a couple of different ways. If you are using a smaller diameter braid, you might want to loop the mono, but today in this case we are going to loop the braid. And the first thing that you're going to want to do is just stick that mono through your loop. Make sure you have enough tag end. We're going to twist it at least 5 to 7 times, somewhere in there. Just go ahead and take your mono and put it back through the loop that you made. And then what you're going to want to do is kind of work this knot closed. Make sure you wet it, and go ahead and just kind of pull on the two ends, and then grab your tag end to just kind of work that braid so it doesn't get all cinched up on you. And just like that, you have a solid knot from your braid to your mono. Now, back to what I said earlier, I do like to grab a glove for this. I'll basically grab that line with the glove, just kind of put it in between my thumb and my index finger, right above the reel here. They do make line spoolers that you can use for this too. I'm old school. I like to just grab it with my hand and keep everything tight. Now, the amount of braid that you're putting on this reel is really gonna depend on how much copper that you're planning on putting onto this rod, or how much lead core you're planning to put onto this rod. Because we are putting 225 feet of copper on, I'll be able to spool this quite a ways up with some braid. Again, you just want to be sure that this thing isn't going to get spooled out on you if you get a big king on. So I'll just kind of continue to spool this up until I get it to where I feel is adequate enough. I just kind of eyeball it. All right, I've spooled this up about as far as I think I need to in order to fit that 225 feet of copper line on here. So now what we need to do is terminate this braid to the copper. So now you really want to refrain from pulling too much copper off of here. You want this to kind of remain on the spool. That way you can spool it directly from the spool onto your reel. Copper has a tendency to kind of coil up or backlash on itself. And the last thing that you want to do before putting this on your reel is just kind of create a bunch of kinks in it. So be sure that you're keeping everything tight on the spool. Only spool out enough to get that knot tied, and then keep it very tight on the spool. Try your best to keep everything tight. Only pull off enough that you need to basically make this termination. And then what I like to do is, once I get enough of that peeled off, is I'll take that tape that was holding this down to begin with and re-tape it on there, kind of to just hold that copper in place. That way it's not going to unspool on me here once I make this termination. So let's go ahead and tie this up to our braid. So the knot that I'm going to do here is a knot that is very similar to how I connect my braid to my mono. This is called an Albright knot. You do it this way, you shouldn't have any problems. But again, there are a couple of different ways you can modify this Albright knot to make things a little different if that's what you're wanting to do. But again, this is a knot that's worked for me in the past. So the first thing that you're going to want to do is just make a loop with your copper. So I'll go ahead, make sure I got enough of a tag end here to make it a little easier for me. But basically what I'll do is I'll make a loop and really tighten that up. Not all the way, but make basically like a nice short little loop like this. Take your braid and you're going to put it through that loop. Again, giving yourself enough of a tag end to make this a little easier on you. Then what you're gonna wanna do is you're gonna wanna wrap this braid around this copper line. I would do it 5 to 6 times. That's typically what I will do when I'm tying this up. So I'll go ahead and wrap this around the copper. And you can pull that tight on every wrap you do. Keep those wraps tight. There's 2, there's 3, 4, 5, 6, and we'll go 7. Again, keeping this all tight while I'm tying this. Then what you're going to want to do is take that tag end of your braid and put it back through the loop that you created earlier with that copper line. And then again, keeping that all tight, pull that tag end all the way through, and then try to put some pressure on that, pull that knot tight. And then what you're going to want to do is continue to kind of push this loop down here. So really kind of push on that copper to get that loop cinched. You can go ahead and wet it to make it a little easier to slide here. Once you wet it, you can continue to pull on that tag end to kind of slide that knot down your copper loop here. Take your fingernail and just kind of press it all the way down, really trying to cinch that loop tight on that copper line, just that way that knot can slide a little closer to the end of that loop. Again, you can kind of really pull on that, make sure it's all nice and tight. And that is basically gonna be your termination from your copper line to your braid. So that's terminated. I'll probably just tighten that up just a little bit more here, and then we can get to spooling up this copper onto the reel. All right, so now that we have our copper terminated to our 50-pound braid, Next, we are gonna spool this up onto our Silas X reel. Now, how I like to do this, again, I have this taped. That way this copper wasn't spooling off while I was tying that. But what I like to do is actually set this in a screwdriver into one of my finger rod tubes. And as it's sitting in there then, I will spool this up directly from the spool right onto my reel. So there's no kinking. I'm not setting this on the ground and letting this thing roll all over the place. I'm taking it from a fixed location and spooling it right onto the reel itself. When I spool up my wire, what I like to do is point this rod directly at the spool. That way, again, it's coming directly off the spool straight into the reel. I'll use this glove to keep everything tight. So let's go ahead and start spooling this up. And I'll just make sure everything's kind of tight. And when I reel, that tape will just basically fall right off. Make sure that knot can get through the guide on this Piscifun reel. Again, if you're having issues getting this knot through the guide on the reel, you can actually pop that little guide out. It takes a little bit of practice and a little bit of force, but you can get that guide out. However, I haven't had any issues getting this Albright knot basically through the guide without having to take that little inner guide out. So we'll just spool that up. Again, fits perfectly right through that guide. And now we're good to go. So we'll get this spool going here. Obviously spooling up this full spool of 225-foot copper. If you put the right amount of braid on, you should be able to spool this basically all the way full without anything hitting and still have enough room to tie on your leader. All right, we are nearing the end of our spool here. So now the next thing we have to do is tie on our leader. And today we are gonna be tying on a 30-pound monofilament leader. This is Trilene Big Game. Never had any issues with this stuff. It holds up really well. But in order to tie up this mono to this copper, what I like to do is splice it with braid. I don't want to run into any issues of this copper destroying or wrecking the leader material that I'm adding to it. So what I'll do is I'll take a splice of 50-pound braid. Again, I'll use that Albright knot to do the same exact knot that I did to terminate from the braid to the copper earlier. So let's get the braid splice added to this copper first. We'll go ahead and tie that. All right, we got that copper terminated to the braid. Now I'm just gonna kind of pull off basically a 12 to 15 inch piece of braid. Again, this is just a splice to go from the copper to the mono. Now we'll take our 30-pound monofilament. Again, just using that same knot that we used earlier to splice the braid to the mono on the backer. Once that knot is tied, you're good to spool on a leader. I'm gonna spool up about 50 feet of mono here for a leader. We'll just make sure this copper gets in the reel all right. My splice fits through that line guide very easily. There's my braid to mono splice. Now we'll go ahead and put about 50 feet of monofilament on here. And just like that, we have about 50 feet of mono spooled up on here. I'll go ahead and cut that, attach the rod, put everything back together, tie on my barrel swivel, and we're gonna be good to go. We have successfully spooled a 225-foot section of copper line. This line setup will sink anywhere from about 50 to 70 feet, somewhere in there. Again, it's gonna be dependent on speed. This is a 45-pound test, so it's gonna sink a little faster than the 30-pound. I like running that heavier stuff simply because it gets down in the water column. The big main purpose of copper or lead core setups is simply to get some of your lines that you're able to put on boards out from the boat just a little bit deeper and kind of get them away from your wire divers, your downriggers and stuff like that. That way things are really out of the way, but still allowing you to get down to that water column that you need to get to catch some of these big fish on the Great Lakes. So if you're looking to set up a copper rod, hopefully this video helped you. Again, there's a lot of different ways to do it out there. This is just what works for me. I've been getting a lot of questions on it, so I thought I'd do a little bit of a breakdown video for you. I'm sure there's gonna be some haters out there that are gonna say I'm doing this completely backwards and it's not the way that they would do it. But if you, again, don't wanna do it this way, you can probably find a few more videos on YouTube just kind of explaining a few different ways that you can terminate this successfully and be able to use it out on the water. So again, this is what works for me. Hopefully it works for you. Thank you guys again for checking this one out. If you do want to get out on a guided trip with me on Lake Michigan for salmon or out on Green Bay for some walleyes, I will leave a link listed down below where you guys can get out with me for a day. We'll have some fun, teach you a little bit about live scope if that's what you want to do, or maybe haul in some big silver fish from the Great Lake of Michigan. Again, my name is Cody Silberg. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, keep living your dream. We'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.